pretty stressful. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's been bananas level stressful the last 3 months, but I've begun to get ahead of the curve as far as actually having income and working out how to do it in a way that I feel good about it, as opposed to doing half-baked work. You know that feeling.
Yeah. Because when this started all in March, right? So we get March, April, May, June, the beginning of July, it's going to carry on. The best epidemiologists and virologists and sociologists and everyone says a beginning of a normal in November. Then everything will shut down for December. Hopefully we tentatively go back into the new normal and not just go straight in like in Arizona or a Texas or whatever. And we can sort of like not have to go to a third lockdown of sorts. And then we're looking at maybe starting 2021 again, but with most people on a fraction of the income, so many people without a job. We like the last thing that we're definitely, put it this way, people choose alcohol before entertainment. Every time.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Because, you know, if you've got alcohol, you don't really need comedians. We're just the addition to alcohol. We're like the cherry. I've never thought about it that way, but that is exactly what we are. Yeah, and I think it's actually going to be longer. I mean, unless there's a cure, who's going to go sit in the theater? I mean, I'm not going to go sit in the theater if me going to see a show could kill a relative. I mean, that's bananas. So I'm very skeptical about how we get out of this, but we've never been in this situation. So there obviously is a place at which you go, okay, it's safe to go out. And I don't know if the vaccine's the answer to that. You'd think it is, but I just don't see how we're going to be going back to business by January or February next year. Even it's really like, yeah, very strange.
The way I see it is, what movie would I go and see? What movie would I take a risk and go to the cinema?
3D. I've got to say it's Avatar. Oh, so, wow. Granny or Avatar, Granny or Avatar.
That's literally that's what you have to do, right? At a whim, in January, I was going to fly to Joburg with my girlfriend just to go and watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show or the Rocky Horror Show at Monte Casino. And then fly back, organize a babysitter. It would have been great expense, like a completely unnecessary expense. Flights plus accommodation and meals and babysitter and tickets and all of that. And now I regret it. I regret it so much because I do not know when I will be able to go and watch the Rocky Horror Show in a theater again. And it's not just, sure, we might be able to get back into a theater again, but if say we do have to do social distancing, like a meter or 6 feet apart, it's not the same, right?
No. Remember those old school, like, you know, a proper comedy, not old school, but it's still a thing. It's proper comedy club where people, right, like the person, you're like, that's what makes it work. And they're laughing and this one's like rolling around, and that's what makes the hits. There's actually research on that. Like the people laugh 30 times more frequently when they're around other people, because we see people laughing, get permission. I mean, you know, this is what you do.
Absolutely. So it's why you don't laugh at Dave Chappelle on DVD.
Yes, you enjoy
you
it.
watch it going. You watch it and you go, wow, this is compelling. This is very watchable. That's very clever. I can't believe you got away with that. You never sit there guffawing like you do in a club.
But you and I have been doing comedy for like decades now, so we're not really not like the rest of the world. We wouldn't be laughing anyway. We'd all still be going, oh, this is a good point there. So
it's true.
If you're in a game, a comedian will make you roll around. So that's also part of it. But the truth is that we have to find other ways to plug into this. Is the only way I'm surviving. Because I mean, I was meant to be in Edinburgh Festival in the beginning of August now, and now that's toast. And you know, I've got a great show for it. I'm ready to go, and I had to put my whole freaking life on. I mean, we all have, and it's not a big problem to have compared to getting kicked out of your shack by the DA. But it's annoying.
But it doesn't matter if your overheads are 20 grand a month and you make 20 grand a month, and your overheads are $1 million a month and you make $1 million a month. We're all in the same boat. So you can't.
Well, I think we got choices. I mean, you can cut down from $1 million a month, but it's harder to cut down from 20 grand a month. So, you know, what's been cool is we're going out less, we're spending less on food, blah, blah, blah. So we actually have a little bit more surplus cash. So while it's taken a while to catch up on income, to work out this online show format, at the same time, it's bad, but it's not as bad as it could be because I had fallback space. So I went like, okay, let's just spend less. And then suddenly you're surviving on less. You realized why those grannies are so obsessed with saving the baked beans.
Yeah. So like, how long can you go? I mean, perhaps you're in a more privileged position than other comedians, actors, especially theater actors who are living from gig to gig. And can you imagine both? And unfortunate thing about theater actors is they end up marrying theater actors.
Yeah.
So no income
There's no cash
whatsoever since March, or actually since their last gig, which was probably a panto in December.
Exactly. Well,
and nothing for the entire year.
The advantage of comedians is that we write our material and perform our material. And, something that's happened, which you had to kind of watch it happen to go, oh, wow, that's amazing, is yes, theaters shut down, and yes, comedy clubs stopped, and yes, corporate gigs, which is where we make our money, as you know. Unless you're a great radio kind of vibe, like you've got the
nice little radio gig on the side.
I think so, but it's great and well deserved. So the dynamic is that because they still need entertainment. I mean, the banks still have staff. I mean, yes, the turnover, the retrenchments are crazy, business is going under, but the bottom line is insurance companies, banks, a lot of the bigger industries which are able to have people working from home easier because they're computer-based, do need some kind of product. And so obviously, like 4 months ago, where we at now, 3 months ago, I was like, my brain was like, this is clearly where this is going. This is clearly, you've got to get this working. So I just spent all my time writing shows that were for this environment, that dealt with the problems that people would have here. And as a result, I've got like 4 great products that are perfect for this. One's called like Zoom with a View, which, here's my camera. There's the overlay that I can create. So that's Chester missing Zoom with a View, and Chester missing my puppet, or gate crash a Zoom meeting, ask your boss some awkward questions. How's the pineapple beer going? Is your dog killed the
and then do you record those and then?
No, these are live. So I do them like,
you don't record the live recording?
And they post it anyway. I haven't recorded this one, partly because when you record it, it takes a lot of, your computer's working a lot with the amount of graphics and images I'm throwing around. So I've been like, I don't want to take any chances. So I have clients who've recorded it, but I haven't. And the other problem is that the content I'm doing is very much about, what's going on at Standard Bank, and I can't share that video.
That's very corporate specific,
all the material, because all the material is kind of scripted around their situation, which is really fun. It's like that. You know how good you are. You yourself are good at audience interaction and riffing off what's going on in the room. Because if you get it right here, you set up a TV screen. I put my TV in front of me over here, and HDMI, and I put this whole Zoom thing with 40 people on it in front of me. And so it's like, and I can see them. So it's like a show.
It was like that animated chat thing that I used to do, Cassie. Don't know if you remember that.
I do remember. I can't remember the visuals, but I remember the name that you did it.
Yeah.
And I used to do that character. Hi there, my name's Cassie. And, oh, look over there in the back there.
Yes, there. I love it. Your voices.
That was a long time ago.
I loved your voices, man. I love that stuff.
Now, but I mean, you've diversified quite well then. So you saw this coming. You're one of the more, you're one of the hardest working and certainly very prepared and very pragmatic entertainers. Many of us out there are, just go from gig to gig and try to get better a little bit here and there, and just, you've got all these multiple platforms. Do you think many of the comedians are sort of following suit? Or, I mean, I'm going to be chatting to them throughout the week, so I don't know what they're doing. Not everyone can be as immediately without thinking funny like Skulk Bezuidenhout. There's a guy who just switches on his front camera on his Instagram and gets 40,000 views. Yeah, and he does an online show, and 2,000 people buy tickets. And I'm like,
totally.
How?
And he speaks to an audience. Well, it also, I mean, Skulk speaks so well to his specific audience. So he has audience, like his crowd and my crowd are just totally different people, almost. There's a gray area in the middle there, but so he just speaks. He embraced the sort of a position of a certain age, a certain type of Afrikaans identity, and offering of how to be a South African within the social dynamic that's aware of the past, but sort of this quirky kind of personality. And I think he really nailed that as a social contract with his audience. It gets a bit weirder when your social contract with your audience is about racism, and your audience then is you're talking to white people about their most awkward subject. So it suddenly becomes whoa, okay, what are we talking about now? But it's fine. There's a market for that. So I kind of have to be very strategic about, okay, I'm doing corporate gigs, and then people who want to deal with change will get me in, or overseas, and I can be more politically aware because there's a bigger politically aware audience. So like in Canada, my shows will sell out like crazy, but here I have to market quite strategically a bit more.
Yeah. So you're doing okay. You're getting by.
Great. I've got tons of corporate gigs. Now I'm going to sound like the douchebag that I am, because I've got a master's degree in corporate culture. So that kind of helps when businesses need a reason to book a comedian. This comedian will teach you something while he's doing a show. So I think that's advantages and just strategy and stuff. I'm doing well. In fact, I just am frustrated that I can't pursue the live aspect like you're talking about, because there's a definite magic.
But I get a sense that you're okay with that. You understand what we're going through. You've made a plan, and fondly look forward to when we can get back to that. But you're certainly not pulling your hair out and putting fake news on Facebook.
No, man. Look at this. Look at where we're at now, man. Firstly, as I say, as you and I know, we're having it easier than a proper, like someone in a shack. So let's relative entitlement. And then the next issue is that this is an amazing dynamic. Look how close we are to each other effectively. It's like we're having a Zoom call with exactly.
Closer than if we were backstage.
There's my one. There's my one. And what's great with this is that I'm tuning and talking to you. I want to do a punchline, and bam, the puppet's doing the punchline, bam, back to me. So it's got this electric boom, boom, magic, and I can add graphics to this. So there's an image of Ramaphosa while we're talking about Ramaphosa, back to the other camera. It's got this TV live fusion, and then I can drag you up, and I can, in live TV, you can't talk to someone in the audience, but this you can, and you can produce it with all the shebangs of actual TV. That's an overlay. I mean, there's so I'm behind it, and I'm just adding that using streaming software. I mean, you can't do this live. It's actually pretty exciting. Plus, of course, the Facebook streaming and stuff, we can talk directly to our audience, people, an interaction that we knew was there, but we didn't really grab until we had to.
I think we're going to look back at the days like 2019. We're going to look back at that in the way we now look back at the fact that comedy clubs used to be smoking areas. So we remember that transition, right? And how awkward it was and how we thought it would kill the industry. So there we are, hurricanes, and the entire bottom pit is just filled with smoking drunk louts. And it was literally, it was comedy heaven, right? And then the legislation came in, and we were like, hang on, all the louts have to go back behind the screens in the smoking area, and then we're left with all the conservatives in the front with lots of space and sort of like cocktail tables. And we were like, the industry's done, it's over, we'll never. And then it did change. We just the louts decided, okay, fine, I'll smoke after the set, but I'll come down, and they came back to the front, and the vibe came back. So it changed. We were very concerned that that it would ever be the same again, but it changed. But it's like it didn't change.
And what's exciting about this change, it's not exciting now that the world economy is crashing and people are dying, but other than all those problems, the truth is, apart from everyone dying, the truth is that the skill set we've developed here is not going away. So firstly, we've learned that we can do shows for people who are in Canada, New York, London, Australia, and South Africa at the same time. We can stream all the shows we do, and also, when it goes back to normal, the virtual teams have been happening the whole time, but how to make them fun and exciting and interesting suddenly you know, I have a skill set that I can, if I'm in Edinburgh, if I'm in London doing a gig, I can, at 3 o'clock, what time? I've got a South African show for a corporate that's based in Polokwane. I'll be at the corporate in Polokwane, but I'm in London. I can do that. And I would never have, we've shifted. So there's a whole other income stream sitting there after this. But right now,
it is tricky. And then there's two aspects I want to talk to you about. Like, what is the alternative to the capitalist system we have right now? And if the economy does break down, what is an alternative that we could work on? We'll get there. But I want to ask you about, because a lot of your, especially your corporate stuff, I know your last show with Chester touched on the issues of white people not accepting the fact of privilege, and also not quite understanding that because you have racist tendencies or, you know, you've reformed a little bit, it doesn't mean that you aren't, you know, an entrenched racist. Certainly the older generation who grew up in apartheid, you were structurally created a racist. So you have these conversations. So as a comedian, as an entity, as an entertainer, as a communicator, this you are intimately married to. There's a lot of other comics out there that are like going, you know, that are evolving, going, wow, the area in which I can play is shrinking. So you know, so many people are asking me, like, is there even a space for stand-up as we know it? What's to that?
No, it's because, you know, it's like the smoking situation. Oh my gosh, the world's over. It's like, no, it's not over. You're just used to a new world now. You know, in the 17th century, it was normal to go to, I think 16th century, it was normal to put a cat in a bag, put it in like a netting sack, and put it over a fire and watch it burn to death. And that was like a joke. Like, you'd watch that for entertainment.
That was like the ding dong ditch of the day.
Exactly. It was, look at that cat. Oh, that was a good one. Get a bigger one. So humor changes over time. That's just part of it. We are becoming more humane as a society that cares about people. And I mean, surely that's a good thing. They're going, but you've ruined the fun. So, no, you just had a really horrible version of fun. It's like bullying the kid at school and enjoying doing it. It's like an evil thing to do. It doesn't mean that there isn't room for some very politically incorrect material. It's just, I think most people have no idea what they're talking about when they say political incorrectness. So you can push the boundary, just whose boundary are you pushing? It's much easier to mock Jacob Zuma's accents than to call out Johan Rupert's wealth and go, how did this guy, hang on a second. You were selling cigarettes when black people weren't allowed to sell cigarettes. Oh, you did well out of that. Can we talk about that? So you get a lot more pushback for the Johan Rupert material than you will for the Jacob Zuma material. Much, much more pushback. Because of who owns the TV channels or who owns the radio stations. And it's not some conspiracy theory. It's just the dynamics. If I do a joke about Gareth Cliff, I'll literally get people phoning me the next day going, are you sure you want to do that joke? But if I do a joke about Malusi Gigaba, I don't have the social networks that would mean Malusi. And Malusi Gigaba's people know, yeah, you probably should mock him. But we won't think the same for Gareth. I know they're not comparable, but what happens in comedy is that we think we can't say certain stuff, but you actually can say a lot more than you believe. You just have to know what the territory is. So on the racism,
I get that. I get that.
No, I know you get that.
We've done this. We
are used to this because we're comedians have had to test the stuff.
However, for me, where it's changed is, right? So I always go back to pre-Facebook comedy, right? So even Twitter, pre-Twitter Facebook, which means you and I would work on a gag and be great. And then I would do it, we'd do it at Hurricanes and at Carnivals and go down to a comedy warehouse. And you could tour with this gag for about 6 months. That and your repertoire. And now in a world of instant gratification, every second Tom, Dick, and Harry is a comedian. So they're putting all their funny one-liners up, and then they're accessible to absolutely anyone. I suppose it's like comedy's the new porn. So everyone's got access to it. Everyone's a comedian. And here's where the difference is, right? Where people get into trouble is we would go onto stage and we could know that we're skating a line and then bring the audience back. And at the end of the show, we would wrap it up and go, this has all been comedy. Let's carry on with our lives. Whereas that, because of social media, it's now you said something and that is tagged to you. you said that it was racist, or somebody has to come back and says, I perceived it to be racist or sexist, misogynist, hateful, and it's tagged onto you, and that's now you. You are, oh, you're that guy, you're the racist guy. And so you don't get the opportunity, because of social media, you don't get the opportunity to wrap up the contract, so to speak. Yeah, that was a show. We pushed the envelope, we wrap it up, and now we move on, and we're actually normal people. So the dynamic that we live in right now is like, and so because people have this knee-jerk reaction to, that was racist, you're a racist. Look at Deep Fried Man. He's, his career now is quite literally compromised because of a fight just like that.
So
that's
no, you're right. You're right. I think there's a lot of complexity in the dynamics that you're describing. So, and I think always the danger with this conversation is and especially on social media, it's actually the problem with social media, is that there's no complex conversation. So I saw Richard Calland, the amazing political analyst, say on Twitter earlier that populism is the lack of nuance. So in other words, what's going on is there's no nuance in the conversation about how comedy works. And there's no nuance in the reaction to, hey, you really shouldn't be saying that. Well, you can say it, but we're not going to like you if you say it. We're going to now make your racism an economic problem for you. And that's capitalism. But of course, ironically, the capitalists don't like it when you do that. The problem is that you're right. There can be a difficult dynamic about we're canceling whichever comedian because they said this stuff. That can be a problem. But what's also a problem is that, let's find an example. I think a lot of people are unaware of the power dynamics of how comedy works in South Africa in particular. So in other words, who has money to go watch comedy? 50% of this country lives on 40 Rand a day. They're not watching comedy. They can't afford to eat. They can barely afford to eat. So the majority of Black South Africans can't actually shape how they're understood. And what I mean by this is if I go into the Cape Town Comedy Club and I do a stereotypical, this is Julius Malema's accent, ha ha ha, audience will kill themselves. If I do a stereotypical, this is Helen Ziller or someone from Constantia, it'll get a laugh, but it won't get that.
But it's a bit prickly,
because who's in the room is not people who sound like Julius. In general, very generalized statements I'm saying it, and the complications there, I realize. So what that means is economics drives what comedy does, because Black comics going to, you've said corporate gigs, the amount of corporates where it's all white people, like the entire exco is white people. So you've got to appeal to that 50-year-old white guy that your sense of humor works. So it's just, that shapes what comedy does. So when you go, that's a racist joke, it's in an environment that already leans into racism and sexism, which doesn't mean we should shut down comedy and that taking risks shouldn't be allowed. That's also difficult and problematic, and people should be allowed to take risks and make mistakes. The problem is that the wind, the direction of the current is towards racism. So it's quite hard to push back against that in a nuanced way. And the problem is the conversation happens on social media. And so it's never authentic. We don't give people the benefit of the doubt. We see people,
And very rarely anyone says, oh, you've got a point there. I didn't know that coming in. I apologize. If I had a rant for every time I heard that, I'd have a rant.
No, you're right. I never saw it that way. I got it wrong. Never ever been said on Facebook. Never been said
on the socials. And because you and I we're from the same page. We noticed that there needs to be and structural change. There has to be real change. America's feeling the heat of it right now, and South Africa should more to a certain degree. There needs to be. There needs to be real change. The Black Lives Matter movement is talking about that right now. And I keep trying to remind people that are pushing back. And I try to do this gently, and I always try to do it in person, not on social media, because as you said, it's not a place for that debate. Is that the Black Lives Matter is not the first. This is not a first. this is, there's been waves, you know, we all remember Trayvon Martin, and we all remember there's waves of injustice, which, you know, which peak and then they seem to fizzle out, and then they peak and then they fizzle out. And this one has got quite a substantial peak and now actually has the power to affect real change.
Well, I think that you're right. It is an exciting time. I think if you care about people and care about just how profoundly unfair this world is. But the other side of the coin is, I think most of us are quite oblivious to how unfair the world is, to how we got to be where we are, and the levels of inequality that are going on. And so, and it's difficult because whenever you say stuff like this, you sound like, wow, you this crazy radical, you're saying these, but the truth is, no, we just really normalized to bigotry. It's just become the status quo. So it's very hard to get used to. So people would judge that much. You know what it's like for me? As often this relates to racism in South Africa, but it's true for the whole world. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, I'll go for it.
Yeah. So
shit fuck. There we go. I've done it.
I'll make it a friendly version of it. Imagine going to a cave and you walk into the cave and everyone in the cave is pumping chickens or their cousins. And you're like, guys, do you know that you're pumping your cousin? That's what we do. It's what we do here. Why are you judging us? You're pumping your cousin, man. The whole world thinks pumping cousins stupid. No, it's what we do. Now, say, for example, you go to comedy in Melbourne, London, New York. If you do a racist-y kind of black accent-y stereotype, if a white guy did a stereotype, a Indian accent or whatever that is, you'd be kicked off the stage. You'd never be invited back, and the audience would go quiet. In South Africa, that's not going to happen because we've been normalized to racism. So everywhere you go, there's this level of prejudice that's just normal. So as far as Black lives, is going to shift things. But the level of racism in the world is so profound that it's bananas. English is spoken global, like white people are everywhere. The English still call the land they stole the Commonwealth. That's like mugging someone and going, sharing is caring. It's bananas. We haven't dealt with our history at all.
A lot of people don't know this, but there's this little Marxist in me.
Yes, of course, yes.
And and I keep wondering, you know, the way the world is right now, and like say, basically we can write off this entire year. Most people, they're going to go bust after missing 3 paychecks. Most people around the world, and we're talking about what you perceive to be your middle class, right? There's that small percentage, not even the 1%, maybe call it 10% globally, where you might have a nest egg that can sustain you for a few months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. That's such a small percentage, it's a negligible number. The majority of your middle class and the knock-on effect to everyone else can't survive so many months, which is why you see so many of these economies, you know, only after 2 or 3 months, the entire 380 million population of America wants to get back to work. And it's not for fear of missing out on socializing. It's because they literally cannot pay the rent, feed the kids, go to school, just do the things that they need to do. We're experiencing that in South Africa. And this protracted right up until November. There's only so much that the government can do. In an ideal world, you'd say, okay, cool. You know, my question is, what can we're in early July now. What can, say Rona doesn't let up. In actual fact, gets a little bit worse. Say that new Spanish flu not the Spanish flu, the new swine flu, the G4 joins this one, right? So now we're talking about, you know, pandemic on pandemic. And where can the human race see itself in, you know, the end of the year or next year? Best case scenario, worst case. Worst case scenario, just watch an episode of Walking Dead. Okay, cool. Yeah. I got that. Okay. Or do you think it'll ever get that bad?
You know, what I'm very cautious about with what I do, because I say stuff that's often people get quite riled up. So I try not to step outside of what I don't know. So I know how culture works. I know the dynamics of social politics, racism, classism, but I'm not an economist. So I actually don't have a fair opinion. But what I do know is my new show, it's a great name. It's called South Africa Junk, but with status. And that's like a political talk. Yeah, it's a political talk on exactly this dynamic that goes into the economics. And the main point is that America is going to get a $2 trillion bailout for COVID-19, which is an incredible amount of money. It's like Chester said, it's 3 Guptas, 2 Zumas, and a My City bus. So South Africa doesn't have that economic clout, and it's partly because of our current government, and partly because you understand that our current government is a product of economics and apartheid, and that our wealth is being extracted to Europe, so they have a more stable economic system, a political justice system. So when you ask what's going to happen, well, the wealthy world will find a way to fix it. I mean, the other side of this thing is we can't have, Jeff Bezos is coining it of himself. So our businesses are being built up through this time, and we have survived this thing in the past, severe viruses in the past. But the question becomes about the social compact, the social contract, as the Financial Times spoke about, and Cyril Ramaphosa spoke about, where you go, it's not plausible to have this level of inequality in South Africa alone, and act like we are a rainbow nation. Because if you are poor and you're living somewhere that you can't pull up your socks on 40 Rand a day. You can't even buy socks on 40 Rand a day. So there needs to be a way that we deal with what happened in this country in a way that's fair and just, but is intelligent. So the problem is that who's going to do that, who's going to lead it, and it has to be a public and private, the government and the private sector working together. We've seen a lot of that kind of thing happening recently with, for example, Bidvest going and cleaning schools, people are building hospitals, the private sector is getting involved, the banks rolling out the Solidarity Fund money. They've been very instrumental making sure the UIF situation gets solved. So that kind of thing can fix South Africa and in the world as well, so that we don't have this incredible economic inequality without being socialist. I mean, I think capitalism, you can just be nicer. I mean, it can just be a gentler version where people do have
nice capitalism.
Just kind of, what a stupid idea that is. But
polite burglary.
Basically, yes, just like a little bit more decency in the world.
You can be nice when you burgle. You don't have to. You can just
exactly. Everybody does burglary.
And I'm only going to take the flat screen, and I'll leave you the small box in the bedroom.
Exactly, just the small box. So I don't know the answers, but I think that there might be advice.
The socialist in me screams up and says, Jeff Bezos, you don't need the $200 billion right now. Mark Zuckerberg, you don't need $160 billion right now.
Yeah,
that the sense of equity, somebody at some stage has to step up and say, okay, cool, we need to little bit level the playing field. And for the same, and the same here in South Africa. If you are a business that's in retail online shopping, or a business that has thrived in this time, somebody has to come up to you and say, listen, you've done well during a really, I know the old capitalist mantra of there's blood on the street, buy property. I get that, but it can't continue like this because there is no equity. And here is a great opportunity, not just for South Africa, but for the globe to sort of like go, okay, let's correct the system a little bit. Let's, I don't know. Again, you're not an economist, but I mean, neither am I, by the way. I just want to get rid of tax havens and sort of like,
let's have my plan, guys. Just wait.
Yeah.
a comedian who's also on radio and a ventriloquist who annoys people. These two people are going to solve the problems. I think I think where that falls apart a little bit is that the state needs to be able to deliver. So in other words, even though Cyril might have the best of intentions and William Keys might be doing a great job, but can he get the rest of the ANC to collaborate? And will the public sector the private sector stop being quite as greedy? And is there a way to find a middle ground?
And what about the next
I'm actually quite doubtful. Say again?
Yeah. And then what about the next leader?
Didi.
So you might have you might have the good intentions and the humanist in one president, and you set up the rules, based on the fact that that's a humanist. But the next guy, could have dictatorial tendencies and use that freedom. So I have a solution to that.
Oh, great. I can't wait.
Yeah. AI.
Yes.
So
an iPhone run the country.
You have a computer system set up, and in that you put your constitution, and you put, this is what we want to achieve within this year and 5 years and 10 years. You make all of the decisions, and the only thing that happens when government gets, you shrink government completely. You have a couple of leaders in each area who will listen to the people. The people say, you know what, we want more pistachio ice cream. You say, I'll be sure to put that data into the machine. We get back to the office, pistachio ice cream more readily available, and then the computer decides there's so many people who want this, so many people who don't want that. How do I balance it? And decision from the tender process to infrastructure to everything is made by the computer, and we just do what the computer says we should do.
Hope it's not operating on Microsoft. Well, they actually did.
No, it's working off Sony. It's a PlayStation.
It's fine. They actually had a thing where they proved an AI was racist. So that
I saw that. It broke my heart.
The choices going into it were like a bit prejudiced. So they didn't eventually all the micro.
Yeah, because the programming it's based on the programming input by the programmer. So you bring
someone has to do something. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, listen, I'm actually just glad that you're doing well. But you're always you're always finding a solution. You're busy. You're always getting busy. You never rest on your laurels.
No, you got to keep going and enjoy the juice of what's in front of you. Even if it's not the juice you wanted, you got to work with what's there.
Yeah. I don't know if we've got time for this one, but we had a debate on Facebook, and I don't want to call out names or anything, but Leon Schuster just recently. He's suffering badly. He hasn't aged well. He hasn't aged well. And I got to tell you, I didn't have to wait for the Black Lives Matter movement to come along. Even 10 years ago, I would watch some of Leon Schuster's stuff and go, ooh, that's a bit cringeworthy. That's a bit embarrassing. That hasn't aged well. And I'm saying this from a person who used to introduce Ronnie Modimola on stage as going, this guy's black, but don't worry, he's still funny. So I understand. I understand that I've had to, I was un-PC at one stage, and I might still be even now, and I'm evolving and changing with the times, but it does seem that if there is a comedic institution that has not aged well, it would be the Leon Schuster. And I suppose, I'm asking you, like, what do you say when people come up to you and say, oh, Leon Schuster's getting a bum rap, and he was an institution. What about the good he's done in the country? What do you say?
Well, I learned from the Steve Hofmeyr trial, for those people watching who don't know my vibes.
Oh, I see why you were ducking the shots there now. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's going to happen now. These people are going to come and watch this here.
So
my
just add context here. Sorry.
Yeah, my puppet testament. Yeah, sure. I'll make it.
Explain the story in a nutshell.
So my puppet Chester Missing, who's famous from TV interviewing politicians, took on Steve Hofmeyr on Twitter because Steve tweeted that he said, more or less these words, in my book, blacks are the architects of apartheid. He effectively blamed black people for apartheid, and then he justified it further elsewhere, and it was a very racist thing to say. And then Chester, who's got a lot of Twitter followers, took him on, and this kind of exploded. And then Chester was like, hang on, those people are giving you a car. They shouldn't be giving you a car. So that we contacted the car company and said, if you guys disagree with this, phone this company, and let's tell them it's not okay. You can't say this and be treated like a civilized human being. Like you can't.
Yes.
That's actually a very weird, problematic way to put it, as a decent human being. And so civilization and decency are problematic ideas. But so they took away his car, and it went to court, and we won a court case. What I learned from that is that you can never help people not be racist by acting like you're better than them. You actually have to own your own stuff first. And I know that sounds like a sort of sugar packets, but it's literally true. Is that you alienate people when you kind of look down on them. So my attitudes to racism perpetually is that I was raised white in South Africa. Even if you're young, you go, what about the new generation? We are literally, you don't have to talk an African language in this country. You can literally walk around, and that's colonialism. It's racist that that's the case. So we're all a little bit racist. Like there's white South African, I'm not racist.
We're on a spectrum of racism.
Racism's a sliding scale, and that's what people don't understand. You're never off the scale. So that's half the problem. People go, I'm not racist, I'm a good person. Lots of well-intended people are racist. So Hood thought he was a good person. So So with Leon Schuster, my attitude is, listen, man, he actually does care about South Africa. He's not evil. He's just, he's made racist choices, which is wrong, and he should make new choices. But there's no way, plenty of ways. I mean, the guy's hilarious. He can come back, engage South Africans, and that's what I wrote for a news piece recently. It's like, blackface. I mean, I made him colored, and you know, there was a time when he was racist 20 years ago. Then it was still racist when he was a dude of color on TV, but there he is nailing my privilege. So I had a different argument to it, but it's still, the problem is by even you had colored accents. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's racist. It's because it makes colored people's lives harder because people think that's what you're meant to sound like. It perpetuates a type of treatment. Job opportunities get affected by it. So I'm ashamed of that. I would definitely make that as definitely a choice I would choose to never make again. So I'm not better than Leon Schuster. I'm the same as Leon Schuster. So I'm saying to Leon Schuster, let's deal with what we did and make this country better and be humble about it and acknowledge that we got the gaps we have because of apartheid.
Yeah. So the going forward, I know that where's the next, can I ever get away with doing an accent? Because I'm not good at the accent. That's like a lot of my set.
It's complicated I agree with you. And it's frustrating for me because I'm also good at accents. I just don't do them that much because it sort of gets a bit weird. But firstly, if one understands the dynamics, I think there's a lot more room. But it's still, as a white South African, it was never going to be easy. I mean, we had a crime against humanity happen here. What do you think was going to be a walk in the park? Come on, man. It's ridiculous. The Germans took a generation to deal with their crap. We need to deal with our crap. Yeah. So to put it simply, if we understand that when you laugh at a black person's accent or how you perceive them to sound, because there's no them, people are all different. Like it's the only thing that's in common.
Because a comedian doing a black person's accent, there's a nuance there as well, because a comedian doing a black person's accent, but positioning that black person as a leader. So, you know, as the hero of the story, that's one thing. But if you're constantly making them sound stupid or ignorant, that again is the nuance which we as comedians know, and perhaps the audience needs to be educated on. But I mean, I can't believe in this day and age, if you're still a comedian making a living by doing, you know, black voices, then but if audiences are still buying tickets,
well, this is where it sort of gets no, you're right, and it's incredibly complicated, and this is where it sort of I've literally spent the last few days trying to how to position this, because there's a whole lot of dynamics. Tons of people of color love Leon Schuster, and they love his characters and so on, and they don't see a problem with it. Who am I and who are you to tell them not to? And the second thing is, and it's generally most of the dynamics lie in that area. I think a white person, we just need to understand that when we laugh at how someone sounds, we need to just step back a bit. You and I, to us, don't have accents, because you and I come from the same type of English-speaking class of white South Africans, that our accents are quite similar. I mean, there's minor nuances, but it's quite similar. But we do have accents. We have very clear accents. So accents only become funny because they don't sound normal to you. So to us, stereotypical black, Indian, and colored accents are funnier because what humor does is it defines group boundaries. When you tell a joke, there's always someone you punch at. It's why people from Constantia sound less funny than someone who sounds like Julius, which is deeply racist. And it's because we've been taught this, the media. If you listen to a radio ad, I mean, you're there all the time. Most radio ads that are funny in the past have been like the clever, the payload, the buy it, shop, come to our shop on Thursday will be a middle-class Model C sounding accent. And the quirky, silly person will be a stereotype of a person of color.
Desmond Dubé or whatever,
Exactly. The second problem with what we're saying right now, in my view, is that even if your character is high status, which is what my puppet was. I mean, my puppets interviewed Gwede Mantashe, Helen Ziller, everyone. He's got an award from Ahmed Kathrada for fighting racism. This puppet is not some racist trope, but it also is. Because by creating a person of color, it's sounding, this is how these people sound. You normalize it, that's how it sounds. And then my wife is an actor, and she's classifies herself as colored. So she'll go, and then someone will go, well, that's not, you don't sound colored. And they say, well, how do colored people sound? Colored people sound like colored. If that person identifies as colored, and that's how they sound, that's how they sound. Who are you to tell them? And by using an accent, by positioning an identity as a white person, we shape how the world sees that person of color. Now, we like to tell us it's just a joke, but it actually isn't. Because what it means is there's a level of trust that's associated. You've never met a CEO, which is what I say in my show, who sounds like a Gachi. If you don't know from Cape Town, a Gachi is a guy who sounds Clement Weinberg and meets you on a taxi. There's a stereotype of how a Gachi would probably sound, which is problematic, but people understand the metaphor. You never
see, 10 years ago, you would have just done the accent and not have to explain it.
Exactly. So they would exactly. There's never been a CEO who sounds like a Gachi, because anyone who does grow up with that accent, and there's nothing wrong with that accent, knows that when they're going to make it in corporate South Africa, you've got to drop the accent or people will think stereotypes about you. So actually, even if the accent is high status, it's problematic because it's white people, and I know that it's painful and it sounds awkward, but I mean, you go look who lives in shacks, man. It's crazy what's going on in this country. It's very complicated. So I know people going, I know.
And I ask you this question because I know that you've thought this through. It's considered. It's part of how you communicate. And when I try to communicate this to people, 9 times out of 10 they'll say, "But how come Trevor Noah can do it?" And I literally don't have an answer. I want to say, well, because he's not talking down to people, or because even if I'm telling a story, like I go down to the shops here and there was an Indian guy there, and it's just part of the story. It's incidental that there was an Indian. It's not. The story isn't about the race. There was an Indian guy and there was a black guy, and they were not understanding each other. And then I had to come in and say, he's trying to do this. And he's like, what kind, Lani? And he's like, Asian Fuetu. And I'm like, when Trevor's telling his stories and I hear them, it's like the funny is not the fact that it's not how they're speaking. It's the story that he's telling. And I'm trying to say to people, it's not because he's now the new privilege, because only people of color can tell race jokes about other cultures now, and that we've been exempt from it because we screwed up with apartheid and racism. And it isn't like that. If you actually watch his comedy, it's like you say, he isn't punching down, he's punching up.
Well, I think it's a complicated. I think there's a couple of complexities there. The short answer to people like that, the immediate answer that'll just shut the conversation down, is how you can't say the N word. It's like that. You can say the N word. N word has been used to oppress you and people like you for hundreds of years. Then you get to use it. If you didn't have that oppression, then you can't appropriate the stuff back. So that shuts that down immediately. But it gets sort of complicated, because if you say watch Mark Lottering or Kagiso Lediga, they create black characters, but they're not tropes. They're like they have nuance, they have hearts, they come from within the community. It's like, that's someone that's identified. It's a whole human being. As Chinamanda Adichie says, the amazing Nigerian author, says that more paraphrasing, the problem with stereotypes is not that they're not true, it's that they're incomplete. So you create monotone, simple versions of human beings. So for example, if I tell a story about 2 people outside a shop, and there's 2 dudes of color, and one happens to be Indian and black, only if it's actually relevant to the story do I think we should play that. Because the Indian guy could sound like me, the black guy could sound like me, the black guy could sound like a stereotype of an Indian. It could be anything. So it's when we make a monotone version of a human being that affects people's life chances, because we think that all Indian people are now stereotypes, out to get a deal. Colored people want to steal. Black people are whatever you think black people. So, and white people, because we have so much power over the media, because we are 5 times wealthier in this country, 6 out of 10 senior managers are white. It influences our culture tremendously. What we find entertaining. So that the next nuance with Trevor is that, yes, sometimes he does do accents that I think play to a white audience, that white people find funny about black people. But this dude started in Soweto, and now he's the
host of the Daily Show.
He did whatever he could.
One takes the highest paid comedian on the planet.
And you and I don't have that excuse, and we shouldn't have that excuse. And it's not because we're bad. It's not because we're being racially oppressed. The chances of us being here talking to each other now are entirely based on apartheid. Your parents weren't forced to off out of their homes and forced to do less menial jobs and not to be able to vote. So as a result, so people go, I'm being punished. No, you're not being punished. It's just you've already been advantaged. And if you can't see that, it's because you're racist. It's not because Trevor's problematic. It's sort of where it lies, but there's a lot of complexity there. Sure. And as white people telling black people what they can laugh at is really...
And you know what? This is, a lot of people don't know this, but this is how comedians talk to each other backstage. When we're backstage, everyone's like, "Oh, I'd love to be backstage. What are you guys supposed to be having such a jaw?" And I'm like, "No,
we're doing this.
This is what we do backstage. We don't talk about." Right, hang on. My producer's sending me something. I think we're wrapping up.
Yeah, we better.
If you just want to wrap, and then that's it. We're done.
Perfect.
All right. So, Conrad, thanks for chatting to me today, man.
Thanks, mate. It's really, I've enjoyed it. It's a nice, we don't get to see other comics or people that we're as close to as you. You know, we've had history, and right now we don't see anyone. So it really was satisfying. Thanks. And thanks for reflecting.
And I commit to continuing, and it's nice to know that there is someone there that, you know, has had these hard conversations and actually has to have them in, you know, tougher environments that I can help me with these reflections. And this world that we live in is going to change, and it'll be fascinating to see, you know, where we end up. But I'm sure, as one of the hardest working and most versatile performers out there, you will always find a way.
Doing what I can. Thanks so much, Darren.
All right, cheers, buddy.
What's up, bro?
Sorry, I jumped in and I interrupted, but that's okay.
Fuck.
No, it was good. We'll use it, and if we have to use it with me in it, that's fine.